we're going to be a lot better for it. We're going to have a more rich life. It doesn't mean monetarily you're going to be rich, but if you let those biblical principles, if you use them in a practical way in life, you're going to benefit from it.
Welcome to 1850 Main Street. Come on in and pull up a chair. Today, Rob Walgate from the American Policy Roundtable and Alan C. Duncan, executive producer of the Public Square Media Network, are at the table by the fireplace.
All right, I've been driving you nuts probably about this show for days, at least days, maybe even longer. I'm very, very excited about this broadcast.
It was, you described it as being like Christmas for you, right?
Yes,
what
it was.
You were in the anticipation of what was about to be released.
Wesley Huff is a biblical scholar, and he's been making the YouTube rounds. He recently demolished Billy Carson in a debate. An informal debate, a discussion, I should say. Yeah,
it may have been labeled as a debate, but it was a discussion.
It was a discussion. And for those that don't know, Billy Carson is a kind of a YouTube personality. He talks a lot about ancient manuscripts, and I think he gets into sort of the ancient aliens type of stuff a little bit. And but he kind of fashions himself as a scholar of ancient texts. And he made a lot of disparaging claims about the Bible, tried to say Jesus was never crucified, and that the oldest Bibles say that. And so one of his buddies put together an informal debate with him and Wes Huff, this scholar that we're talking about today.
And because of that, and how it went, and Billy Carson sending cease and desist letters because of how poorly he prepared and performed, it's kind of blown up a little bit on the internet. And because of that, Wesley Huff was invited to join Joe Rogan in studio in Austin, Texas. And Joe Rogan's familiar with Billy Carson as well. Joe Rogan, in the episode with Wesley Huff, says, Billy Carson's a lot of fun. It's just, Joe Rogan basically said, I think people need to know the truth when it comes to some of those claims Billy was making.
Yeah, and so for those, Joe Rogan is the biggest media platform on the planet right now. And so here's a guy in Wes Huff that's studying for his PhD right now, but he works for Apologetics Canada. So he's been making YouTube videos, but I think his channel was maybe, 12,000 folks, which is not nothing. That's good, but it's not necessarily getting you on the radar of Joe Rogan unless there's something that you do that's very interesting to him and to others, and that would be interesting to his audience. So what we've done, we listened to the whole 3 hours and 15 minutes of the interview.
Yeah.
And we're going to play, I pulled 7 clips. We're going to play some clips and we're going to react to them. These are some of the high points. So if you don't have 3 hours to listen to something, we'll give you a quick flyby on some of our major points that we thought were good. So let's get into the first clip. The first one, this was one of the coolest moments to me. My degree's in Bible and theology. I'm certainly not the scholar to the level that Wes Huff is going for his PhD. This is actually inspiring me. I'd kind of maybe want to go back to school after this. But my degree's in Bible and theology. That's an interest of mine. That's kind of an amateur hobby of mine as well. So this moment, when he gives Joe Rogan a gift, I was walking the dog, and I started just screaming for nerd joy about this. He gives Joe Rogan a piece of the earliest biblical manuscript that we know of.
So you were talking about what is our oldest manuscript evidence. So this guy is P52, John Ryland's 457. So that's a genuine Egyptian papyri that I made. I cut it out for you, and then I transcribed the text on that manuscript. So when we're talking about what is potentially our oldest evidence for the New Testament, this manuscript that most likely comes from Oxyrhynchus, Egypt, is the one that usually is universally accepted as our oldest one. And that contains John 18, where Jesus is on trial before Pilate, and where Jesus is on trial before Pilate, and Jesus says, everyone who follows the truth, who is following the truth, follows me. And on the back has the words of Pilate saying, "What is truth?" Wow. the unanimous consensus is that it's comfortably second century, potentially the beginning of the second century, which means that this is found in Egypt. John is probably writing his gospel in Ephesus. So it has to be written by John, spread around, find its way to Egypt, be copied, and then end up in this manuscript, which means that at minimum, you've already pushed the Gospel of John back into the first century comfortably, and potentially even like most likely into the lifetime of the eyewitnesses of these events. And so all of the literature up until that point from the scholarly consensus about the dating of the Gospel of John gets totally rewritten.
To hear Joe saying wow there at the end. That's one of the biggest critiques of the Gospels, particularly the Gospel of John. They say this is way late. This is the one that where Jesus is really depicted as divine. This is just older stuff. Legends have begun to grow up. And he's basically saying, look, the earliest piece of the New Testament that we have, literal piece, proves that it's much earlier than all these scholars thought it was at the time.
It adds validity to it, and that's what people want. You know, and that was the thing about the discussion that Wes Huff had with Billy Carson, was talking about going back and how do you verify the original text? How do you go back and make sure that, you know, the folklore that other traditions have that's passed down, and that's what Billy was talking about. Well, you know, they've told these stories for years and years, and the Wes Huff was trying to say, okay, well, how do you verify that it stayed the same? Where did it come from? Where did it start? And where is it now? And is there consistency in that? And you can look at that manuscript that he has there and say, wow, it goes back to the first century. That's amazing.
Yeah, so all Bible text criticism nerds, P52. He gave Joe a copy of P52 that he made himself. That's the other crazy thing. Yeah. He cut it out with a X-Acto knife and wrote it on him himself.
So awesome.
It's not in that clip, but Joe was saying, he's like, man, he's like, we're really getting nerdy now. He's like, we're just going full nerd.
Well, and it's one of those things too, when someone gives you a gift like that, something you can't, you know, do on your own or make something unexpected, you're like, this is awesome. And it has a story behind it.
Yeah, what do you give the guy who signed a $250 million Spotify deal like 5 years ago and then re-upped it and we don't even know the sum? So what do you give the guy who has everything?
Yeah.
And who says, I haven't even touched my Fear Factor money yet?
Well, and he also says, like you said, wow, when he gets it, because he's blown away by it. But and it deals with something on it, you know, that Rogan talks about a lot and cares about truth a lot. So.
Yes. Okay, so another thing that a lot of these Billy Carson types and people trying to debunk the Bible talk about why these Gospels, why the Gospels that we have. What about these other Gospels? Yeah. Did you just keep books out of the Bible? Did you try to bury books and hide them away? That's the claim. So he's going to talk about why the particular Gospels that we have. So let's take a listen to this next clip.
So very early on, when you have Christians having these conversations, the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, there's unanimous agreement about those. Particularly, and that's not to say that there aren't other Gospels that pop up. It's that you have this chain of custody that goes back to the earliest Jesus community. Jesus has disciples, and there's a group of individuals who we call the Apostolic Fathers, who are the disciples of Jesus' disciples. And so they comment on the books that the disciples of Jesus, or that people within the community of the disciples of Jesus wrote. And so we actually have a very close connection to the time. And we see early on that you have guys like Ignatius of Antioch arguing that there are only four Gospels. He's in the 2nd century, and there couldn't be any more than four. Or Theophilus of Antioch makes the similar argument, and they name Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Now, Ignatius of Antioch also talks about other Gospels, but he specifically highlights the fact that the Gospel of Thomas, Gospel of Truth, Gospel of the Hebrews, Gospel of, you know, these ones that we kind of hear about, Mary, Judas, that the reason we know that they're not associated with the names that are attached to them is because they're being written in times when those people were dead, and they have these rings of pagan philosophy that are incorporated into them, which is completely foreign to 1st century Judaism.
Well, you know, when I watched the entire Rogan interview, for me, it was an apologetics lesson because it gave me answers to questions that people bring up all the time. And that's one of the ones that when people want to debunk Christianity, well, you don't even know, there's so many more gospels. We only know a few of them is one of the things that are said. So hearing that answer, that's going to help me down the road. So
yeah, no, yes, all of us. Because I think the Da Vinci Code was a very popular book series, and then a film series, and some people think, some people know, that's just fictional. But if you look at the book, the Da Vinci Code, in the beginning of it, he says he's telling a fictional story, but he says that all the historical stuff's true. He says this is all based in truth, essentially. You guys can read the intro of it yourself. But and so a lot of people started to get into the pop culture. Sometimes you walk through a magazine rack at a grocery store and you'll see a Time magazine or National Geographic, just one of those kind, and it'll say stuff like a hidden gospel, the Gospel of Judas, and all this kind of stuff. And you think, oh man, did the church bury this stuff? And like you said, that just pretty much puts that nonsense to bed. Oh, which reminds me, I got a text right before we went live.
And I don't know what this says. You told me who texted you, and then I said, well, what did he say? And you said, I'm not telling you till we're live.
Yep. Oh my gosh, I got another one. Okay. I got two more. All right, so Dr. Jeff Sanders is a longtime contributor to the Public Square and to other media products that we do, and he is also a genuine scholar. He could do what Wes Huff can do. Jeff reads the original languages. Jeff is very well studied, very well traveled, and so he's kind of our resident biblical doc around these
Greek
parts.
and Hebrew, we go to him.
Greek and Hebrew, we go to him. Yeah. It'll be Bible study, and he'll just have the Greek text in front of him, just reading it, transliterating it to himself out of his own mind. So we have great respect for Jeff and his scholarship. So I sent this interview to him. I texted it to him. So he sent back to me. He goes, I've been watching this and also cruising through Wes Huff's YouTube channel. What shocks me are the truly stupid, old, and used up, thoroughly debunked arguments that I have heard for over 40 years, yet people are still spewing this stuff out. He cites another YouTuber that was trying to debate with Wes Huff, and he says, Wes easily and politely mauled him. Glad he's on our side. So that's what Jeff said. Oh man, and I haven't read these, so I won't read these on air. But there was more. So Jeff's engaged, Jeff's watching, and Jeff's learning as well.
And there are plenty of Christian YouTubers out there that are making content and doing good work. And the interesting thing to me is in the comments underneath the Wes Huff Rogan piece was people were commenting, it's amazing to see all our favorite Christian YouTubers commenting on this video. Like they were all there, like
in there,
rallying around each other, that Wes Huff was able to present the gospel.
Yeah, he did a great job.
And defend the gospel.
And in a nice way. Like the interview, Rogan, to his credit, I mean, he seems like a guy on a journey, searching for truth, and that's why it was so cool that he gave him P52 with Pilate saying, "What is truth?" And so just brilliant. But I really appreciate Joe having a guy on and just allowing him to talk and asking great questions. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and that's how Joe Rogan is on a lot of subjects. Very curious. He wants to bring in experts. He wants to bring in people that tell the truth. And Wes Huff lives in Canada, but he was born in Pakistan.
That's right.
To missionary parents.
Yeah.
Which is, he's got an amazing. You got to listen to the Joe Rogan piece to get the background and the story. Yeah,
he's got a miraculous healing story in his life as well, and I think that really intrigued Joe.
At a young age.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll play this next clip. This next clip is talking about the Gospels again. Some more proofs for the Gospels.
We have Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John, these 4 biographies. There's really only one other person in and around that time that can claim to have that much kind of independent testimony of their life, and it's the Roman Emperor Tiberius. So he also has 4 biographers. He has Cassiodeo, Suetonius, Tacitus, and Velleius Paterculus. And so the Roman emperor, who's the most famous, most powerful person at the time, has a similar amount of historiographical evidence biographically for his, the events of his lifetime that Jesus does. How do you explain it going from 11 scared disciples in an upper room to being willing to go out and die for the proclamation that you believe that Jesus rose from the dead, and you saw him and you touched him and you ate with him, and he wasn't a ghost. You actually ate fish with the resurrected Jesus.
First off, kudos to Wes Huff for remembering all the names
Yeah.
of the biographers. There will be a test. Yeah, again, firsthand accounts, firsthand recollections, the people that were around Christ at that time, making those claims.
Yeah. The turning the 11 scared fishermen into the greatest missionaries of any faith in history that's a thing you can't look past it.
No.
Willing to die for a claim that they would know if it was true or not.
Yeah.
And it's truly remarkable, and it's unique to the Christian faith. So I thought that was amazing. So that's kind of the biblical text criticism piece I wanted to give people just a quick look at. Now we kind of get into some more broad, overarching stuff here. They talk kind of about the miracle of anything existing at all. I thought it was interesting what Joe had to say about this.
There was nothing.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden there was something. And Terrence McKenna had a great line that said that science requires one miracle. The Big Bang.
Totally.
It requires a miracle.
Well, I always say that when people ask me about, the miracles in the Bible.
Yeah.
And I say, well, if the first miracle happened, if everything, nothing became everything,
Right.
then, Jesus turning water into wine.
That's an easy one.
And Jesus turning water into wine was his first public miracle recorded in the Gospels.
Yeah.
And so, if you can create everything from nothing, if you have authority over everything in heaven and earth, then the other miracles, they fall into place.
Well, I think you've seen a shift, I think, in Joe Rogan's thinking about this, because I had heard him kind of talk more disparagingly about the miracles in the Bible before. How could you possibly believe any of these miracles? But what he just laid out there is a very philosophical argument. Listen, we know we're here, and we don't really know how we got here. If you're looking purely from a scientific, if you have no revelation, you're looking around the cosmos saying, how did anything get here?
Yeah.
Clearly we came from somewhere. Either have to believe matter is eternal, which is what people used to believe, or had to believe there's a beginning of the universe, which is what science is pointing to now.
And as Christians, our faith, our worldview, believes that we were created from a creator.
Yeah. Now, how he did it, I'm open to discussion on that. I truly am. I'm open to discussion on what the methodologies he utilized were, but he did it. And that's we have
he did it.
Unanimity on.
Yes, he did. We came from a creator.
Yeah.
And I can hear our dear friend Dr. Chuck McGowan saying that in our ear as we do this show, without a doubt, and all the writings and
he has a book called In 6 Days.
Yes.
So Dr. Chuck is a very, very literal 6-day creationist, which leads us to the next clip. They talk about the book of Genesis, these early accounts of creation, and oftentimes we read those first few chapters and we're thinking, like, is this a scientific text? What is this? Is this history? Is it science? Is it
Is it a long list of names?
Yeah. Is it what is this? And I thought Wes lays out an addition, it might be all those things, but he lays out an additional way to look at it and how the original audience might have read it. And so let's check this one out.
Literary comparison of ancient Near Eastern origin stories is like a really interesting thing to do, because when you look at something like the Enuma Elish, which was the Babylonian creation story, and then you look at something like Genesis chapter 1, there are obvious crossovers with, like I said before, these ancient Near Eastern conventions. Mm-hmm. But then you can see that the author of Genesis is making these points that are actually rebutting something like the origin stories of the surrounding cultures that largely believe that matter is like eternal and the gods come out of the created world. and that there's this narrative of the battle that takes place where some gods fight against other gods, and the world around us that we see and like human beings are the end result of this battle. And so they would read this on every Babylonian New Year. And one of the main themes was basically that, like, it's all chance. It's all a random mistake. You were created without purpose and intention because Tiamat gets destroyed. And then you read Genesis chapter 1 and it says, in the beginning, God creates the heavens and the earth. And he makes it good. And there's this idea that, like, that's countercultural in the idea that the Babylonians did not think that the world was good. And that, like, at the end of every refrain, it's good, it's good, it's good, it's good, and then it's very good at the end. And that humanity in particular is created in the image of God.
It's Genesis as apologetic literature in the context that it was written. It saw the other creation accounts, and they're saying that's not true. That's not how it happened. God is the one who did this, and he's a God of love, and he makes good things, and the created order is good. I just think that's an amazing way to look at the book of Genesis.
I think it ties to our identity as well, as believers, believing that we're all created in the image of God. And if we're created in that way, if he created us and allows us to do what we choose to do, but he created us in that aura of good. We know there's sin, and we know we are going to sin. But the intent is to treat others how you want to be treated, to love your neighbor. There's good in that.
Yeah. All right, so we have two more clips that we want to play. They got on to talking about one of Joe's friends, Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
And Wes was kind of giving his kind of critique of maybe how he sees Jordan Peterson talking about Jesus.
Because he seems to think that the concept of Jesus as an example is more important than the actual flesh and blood first century itinerant Jewish preacher who was crucified and rose from the dead physically, which is the claim of the Gospels and the rest of the New Testament. That's an example for us to look on and live by. But I actually think that Jesus condemns moralism. And ultimately what I see Peterson doing is looking at Jesus as a moral example. And if Jesus is nothing but a moral example, then you can save yourself and you don't actually need a savior.
So I don't know if Jordan, at this point in his life, would agree with this characterization of himself.
Right.
So that's not the point of me bringing this up. Because I've heard Jordan Peterson say some things that make me think he's moved from there further along the journey towards Christ. So I don't say this to bring up Jordan Peterson specifically, but there are people who hold that view. And I thought it was really insightful what Wes said at the end, that if you can do it, you don't need a savior. So I don't know what your thoughts are on this.
Yeah, that's always the thing. You know, people talk about being a moral people, and to be, I think there has to be definition of what is good and what is evil. Mm-hmm. And I think in the Christian faith, the Bible and Christ's teachings teach what is good and what is evil. There's not, it's a pretty simple thing. Now, some people may say, that's why I want no part of the faith, because it's a bunch of rules. And we know it's not about rules, it is about relationship. And when you have that relationship, then you understand the importance. You understand your sinful nature as a human, but you also understand grace, forgiveness, and love in the strive to be more Christ-like, who is that moral figure.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. I was listening to the Bible app on my way in this morning. Because sometimes I feel like we can think about the Bible, at least me, watching this kind of stuff, where there's a lot of thinking about the Bible, how we got it, what books are supposed to be in it, and what books are supposed to be out. But sometimes you just need to actually just read the Bible.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm guilty of reading about the Bible and not reading the Bible. So I was listening to the Sermon on the Mount. I listened to Matthew chapter 5, 6, and 7 on the way. And Jesus is teaching people how to live, what to do. He is saying, build your life on my teachings. He is saying, obey me. So there is an element of we need to be obedient to Christ. But like you're saying, there's a point to where you're not doing it perfectly. We all know that we're going to sin and we're going to need that Savior.
And I hope the goal would be that down the road, like in anything, you learn from your mistakes so that you can be closer to Christ, so you can be closer in the future than you are now.
Yeah.
So maybe that sin becomes less dramatic. Maybe that quick to anger becomes slower. So many things in our lives that we can learn from through that. And I think time spent in the Bible can help with that as well.
Absolutely, becoming more like Christ. Okay, final clip, and Wes comes straight out and asks Joe a question that I think is one we all need to think about.
What do you think of Jesus? Like in terms of your own like journeying and trying to find answers to ultimate questions. What do you think of the historical person of Jesus?
Well, it certainly seems like there's a lot of people that believe that there was this very exceptional human being that existed. So the question is, what does that mean? Does it mean he was the Son of God? Does it mean he was just some completely unique human being that had this vision of humanity and this way of educating people and spreading this ideology that would ultimately change the way human beings interact with each other forever? I know a lot of Christians that are hardcore Christians that are some of the nicest people you'll ever meet in your life. So it does work. Right? Like if you do live like a Christian and you do follow the principles of Christ, you will have a richer, more love-filled life. So it is true, right? But you have to submit to this concept that this guy was the child of God who came down to earth, let himself be crucified, came back from the dead, explained a bunch of stuff for people, and then said, all right, see you when I come back.
I love it.
I do as well. I think one of the things in today's day and age, probably throughout history, the word that Joe said, submit. It's so hard for us as humans to submit, to think that we're giving up control, when in reality we probably don't have it to begin with.
Right.
We have the control to make decisions, many times make them poor decisions. But if we submit that ability and we allow the Lord to have control in our lives, we're going to be a lot better for it. We're going to have a more rich life. Doesn't mean monetarily you're going to be rich, but if you let those biblical principles, if you use them in a practical way in life, you're going to benefit from it. And I know a lot of people watched the interview and thought, wow, wouldn't that be amazing, talking about Joe Rogan, if he were to come to that realization. And you know what? I feel like the Lord views everyone on earth in that way. Like, wouldn't it be amazing for every individual? Because we're all created in the unique image of God. So it's really cool that Joe Rogan gave a platform for so many to hear the gospel.
It really is, and it sounds like he gets it. He's starting to get it, and so
Well, he sure understands the premise of it all. I mean, you heard him lay it out, but that is the thing I appreciate about him is in the sense of he has a giant platform and a giant show, but he wants to ask those questions.
Yeah.
He really doesn't fake it. Like if he doesn't know, he doesn't know, but it's clear and convincing that he's done research in that area and on this subject, without a doubt.
Well, one of the other things he said he told Wes that I've watched 20 hours of your stuff in preparation for this conversation. So I would suggest to our listeners, as we're going to wrap up here, but I would suggest to our listeners, go to wesleyhuff.com, watch his stuff, go to his YouTube channel, type in Wes Huff, find his stuff. We'll put links in our show notes and descriptions and things like that. But you can watch some of the same stuff that Joe Rogan's been watching and learn from a true biblical scholar. So thanks to Wes Huff, thanks to Joe Rogan, and I guess thanks to you for listening.
The conversations are just getting started. To get connected, check out 1850mainstreet.com. We don't data mine anyone or sell your information. Subscribe today so you don't miss a single conversation. We'll see you next time here at 1850 Main Street.